It was nearly dark by the next time I looked out the window. My body ached like hell from sitting in the same position for hours. We'd gotten through about half of the stack by this point. When we'd started another stack for reports that fit our criteria, it still easily exceeded 100. Meanwhile, it was me and Ayame were out busy with other duties. Furthermore, Toji had left a while back to deal with something else entirely, leaving me and Masaki alone to handle this.
Oi, そっちはどうだ?
I called across the table to Masaki.
はい。何ですか?
Masaki abruptly raised his lowered
お
head.
前、寝てただろ。
いや、そんなことはないですよ。
たく、しっかりしろよ。
Hey, get your head in the game. Come on, Masaki. I poked Masaki in the head and rose to my
ちょっ
feet.
と出てくる。きちんと調べてろよ。
Picked up several of the reports and crammed them into a nearby envelope.
どこか行くんですか?
すぐ戻ってくるよ。ついでに夜食も買ってきてやる。
じゃあ天丼でお願いします。
On my dime? Hilarious. Yeah, no, you're getting a plain rice ball, buddy. Drove over to Nakano. Once there, I parked at Kichiki Hospital. Numerous cars were still there, the staff's if I had to guess. I grabbed the envelope full of missing persons reports and went on in. The hospital was practically deserted. Furthermore, there was no nurse manning the reception desk, likely because visiting hours were over. Swell. Nero was hoping to ask where I could find the doctors. Koharu? Suddenly a voice snapped me out of my musing.
お久しぶりです。
Turned around. Saying there was none other than Chizuru and Fumiya Kichiki. No.
どうも、時坂さん。お久しぶりです。
Fumiya bowed. I'd bumped into him on numerous occasions over the past 6 years, even after Makoto Rokushiki's escape. Though that said, he seemed to feel like he didn't deserve to still be serving as director here after his involuntary part in Erika Yaginuma's murder.
何かありましたか?
Chizuru curiously regarded me.
ええ、まあ、ちょっと調べていただきたいことがあるのですが。
何でしょうか? 僕にできることでしたら何なりと。
ありがとうございます。実は今、都内で行方不明となっている方の調査を行っているのですが。
そういうお話でしたら、こちらで。
Fumiya pointed over to his office just a few doors down.
では、私はお茶を入れてまいりますね。
Kill yourself. Fumiya and I stepped into his office after we watched Chizuru head for the kitchenette.
それで、僕は何をすればいいのですか?
Fumiya got straight down to brass tacks once he'd shut the door.
いくつか行方不明者の書類を持ってきました。この子らがこちらの病院にかかっていたか調べていただけませんか?
拝見します。
Fumiya started flipping through the reports as soon as I handed them over to
比
him.
較的最近失踪し、なおかつこの近辺に住んでいた方の書類です。
こちらのカルテと照らし合わせなければわかりませんね。
Fumiya headed over to the cabinet by the wall.
しかし、このようなことを調べてどうするんですか?
最悪の事態を考えています。
Fumiya froze just as he was about to retrieve a stack of medical
身
charts.
元不明の遺体が発見された際、治療記録などがあれば助かります。
そうですね。
Fumiya grabbed a file labeled S. The initial of the first missing girl I'd shown him, surname, came back over with it.
ありませんね。このくらいの年齢の子であれば、うちのような総合病院よりも地元の医師にかかっているのかも。
I took another look at the kid's report to find that she lived over in Chilpu.
あちらの方にも大きな病院はいくつかありますからね。
そうですね。
So this place is a dead end, huh? And that's when she comes in like, I got your tea ready. Oh, I was just leaving, actually.
お茶をお持ちしました。
Chizuru opened the door at that moment.
ありがとう。
Fumiya took the teacup and heaved a sigh.
もうお話は終わったのですか?
ええ、お手数おかけしました。
いえ、何の助けにもなりませんで、申し訳ありません。
We bowed at each other. Probably gonna need to narrow down our list a little more before I check out those hospitals. Otherwise, I'd only end up wasting my time like I had just
で
now.
は、失礼します。
Polished off my tea and decided to head back to the MPD. I returned to Section 1 after having some ramen at a stall just outside the MPD. Did he grab something from Masaki?
どうだ、調子。
Masaki shot me a reproachful glare from his place on the sofa, bags forming under his eyes.
時坂さん、 なんでいい匂いさせてるんだ。
そりゃ外でラーメン食って。
Oh, right. Crap. I totally forgot to get that rice ball for him, didn't I? Nah, whatever, he'll live.
めぼしいのは見つかったか？
いや流さないでくださいよ。天丼じゃなくても何か買ってきてくれてもいい。
Damn, he's actually showing some real backbone for a change. Guy must be starved.
わかったから。
Produced a coin with a hole for my pocket and handed it to him.
外のラーメンって
結構分厚いチャーシューが乗っててな。
足りないですよね。
たく。わかったよ。
Fished through my pocket, scraped together another several 10 yen
ほ
coins.
らよ。きちんと領収書をもらってこいよ。
屋台でそんなの出るわけないじゃないですか。
Oski left without so much as another word. Oh, you son of a... Fine, I see how it is. How do you like this, then? I knew I was being a petty little jerk, but I still had reports to his pile until it was twice as big as when he'd left it before taking the smaller stack and sinking into the sofa. Okay, just gotta keep at it a little longer. Oh, God, you idiots. I love these two, though. Dawn had arrived by the time I woke up. Reports divided into multiple stacks towered before me. Meanwhile, Masaki was sleeping on the sofa opposite mine. I washed my face at the kitchenette sink, then kicked Masaki when I returned to the couches.
ほら、起きろ。
あ、おはようございます。
とりあえず顔を洗ってこい。
Parked myself atop the sofa and popped a smoke into my mouth after I had shooed Masaki away. Though I'd ended up spending my whole night working on these piles, I had discovered something curious thanks to all that hard work. It was with that thought in mind that I picked up the stack of notable reports. In them, I discovered there were two girls in the same age group as the victim who'd gone missing simultaneously. Not only that, but it happened fairly recently too. Furthermore, both of them lived near Chopu Airfield, not too far from where the victim's body had been found. Thus, it was possible that the culprit had chosen them as their next victims. Masaki came back to a moment later.
聞き込みはやっぱり調布ですか。
ああ、つい先日のことでもあるし、目撃情報も得られるかもしれない。
What's more, the Chofu PD were likely investigating the disappearances as well.
行くのか、レイジ。
Ozmi hailed us as he entered the office.
行くなら佐藤巡査を連れて行ってくれ。俺は指揮を取らなければならねえからな。
分かってるよ、班長。もうすぐ当時も来るだろうから、揃ったら調布に向かうぞ。
わかりました。
I parked right outside Chofu Station.
しかし、3人目もいるとはな。
He'd paid the Chofu PD a visit and asked about the cases, only to find out there was in fact a third missing girl.
ですが、場所が近いというだけで時期は大きくずれていますね。
She wasn't wrong. Said girl's disappearance had been reported several years back. And while the two girls we'd zeroed in on lived close by, the third was from Mitaka. Still, it was fortunate that we'd had a word with the Chofu PD first.
前の被害者よりも先に出ているとなると、最悪手遅れになっていることも考えられるな。
ああ。しかし被害者をしばらく生かしているのは確かだ。まだ生存の望みはある。
では自分たちはこの件について聞き込みをしてみます。
Masaki and Toji hurried over to a taxi parked in front of the station.
ほぼ同じ方向なのですから、車で一緒に行った方がいい。
地元のタクシー運転手から話を聞くのも仕事だよ。それに
何ですか？
俺の車に大人が4人乗るのは厳しいということが。
Damn car dealer. Sold me that bullshit pitch claiming 4 Englishmen could ride in and no problem. I'm the sap who actually bought it. Ayama and I arrived at Chofu Jindaiji, a farming settlement just outside Mitaka city limits.
さえくさ。ここですね。
Ayama nodded to herself after checking the family nameplate.
最初の応対は任せるよ。こういうのは警察官がすべきだからね。
わかりました。
Ayama approached the Saigas' front door, hints of nerves displaying on her countenance.
すみません。警察の者ですが。
A woman in her mid-40s or so opened the door for Ayame.
はい。娘のことで何か分かったのでしょうか。
いえ、それは。
Ayame shot me a look of subdued panic. These people really do have to learn how to walk before they can run.
失礼します。所轄の者がすでに来ていると思いますが。
それはもう。
The woman's name, as it turned out, was Kazuko Saigasa. She and her husband Mitsuo ran a farm here.
娘さんがいなくなった時の
それがよくわからないのです。あの子は遊びに行くと言って出かけてから帰ってきませんでしたから。
普段はどこで遊んでいるのですか？
すぐ近くの公園です。あの日の夜から辺りを探していますが一向に見つからず、今も夫が探しに出ています。
心中お察しいたします。ところでお嬢さんがよく一緒に遊ぶ子などはいらっしゃいます？
さあ、友達を連れてくるということもありません。
ではこの辺りで不審者などを見かけたことはありませんか？
不審者ですか。見ての通りこの辺りは農家ばかりなので、そういった人の噂も聞きませんね。
That made sense. Anyone who did match those rumors would have been the prime suspect.
田村さんという方はご存知ですか？
Drop the surname of the other missing girl from these parts.
田村さんですか。ちょっとわかりませんね。
Kazuko cocked her head. Wasn't all that surprising in retrospect. Sure, the Tamotos were from Chofu as well, but they were on the other side of the Mitaka border, right by Chofu airfield.
ご協力ありがとうございました。お嬢さんは必ず見つけ出します
I
の
mean,
で。
okay, I was gonna say hefty promise, Reiji, but like, he just said we'd find her. Didn't make any promises about her state of well-being.
よろしくお願いいたします。
Emma and I went back toward the car.
あまり有力な情報は得られませんでしたね。
Emma's shoulders slumped.
このくらいのことであれば初動捜査で聞いているだろうかな。
しかしもう一方の田村さんとの関連がわからないのは。
娘の交友関係まで把握できている親はいないだろうさ。
でもどこへ遊びに行くとか誰と遊ぶとかは出かけるとき親に報告しませんでしたか？
Where? Sure. With whom? Not necessarily.
確かにしていてもおかしくはないが。
Personally, though, I'd done no such thing back when I was a snot-nosed brat myself. Yeah.
公園を見に行きますか？
何もないとは思うが、一応確認してくるか。
わかりました。
Man, I'm glad we get a section where, like, technically Aimu's not our assistant, but she's like, you know, part of the gang. I like it. I like it. I'm glad that Aimu's part of the gang. Masaki and Taji gone to pay the Nauticos, family who lived atop a small hill, a visit.
眺めは悪くないな。
Though the house itself was no bigger than any of the others in the area, there were no skyscrapers around to obstruct one's view. In fact, one could even see Mount Fuji from this hill.
飛行場も見えますね。
Chofu Airfield was indeed visible from the side of a large barn used as a garage on the property. Though Japan and the USA had agreed to share it, the runway still belonged to the US military. Unfortunately, Masaki didn't recognize any of the plane models he saw.
行くぞ。
Oh, right, because Masaki was in the military. That part of Masaki's history always, escapes my brain. Like, yeah, no, Masaki served in the war. I was like, why the hell would Masaki know shit about planes? Like, right. Masaki headed to the main house with Toji at the latter's urging.
すみません。どなたかいらっしゃいませんか？
Masaki knocked on the door and raised his voice. Before long, a woman of apparently 40 or so answered.
はい。どちら様でしょうか？
我々は警視庁の委託を受けて失踪者の情報を集めているものです。
Masaki gave a considerably simplified introduction, though he had nothing to feel guilty about, seeing on how it was all true. In fact, if he hadn't explained that, it was unlikely the woman would have believed they were associated with the police.
娘のことでしょうか？
母親の鳴子聡子さんでよろしいですね。
はい、そうです。
Satoko nodded.
娘さんの失踪時のことについて。
はい。あれはもう2年になりますか。
Satoko recounted the tale little by little.
どこで遊んでいたかはわかりますか？
近所だとは思いますが、河原か飛行場の近くか。
Satoko cocked her head.
この辺りだと遊べる場所は多そうですからね。お嬢さんはどんな性格でしたか？
おとなしくて、あまり活動的ではありませんでした。
That means it may have been easy for an adult to whisk her away. That thought crossed Masaki's mind, but definitely don't say it out loud. Masaki turned around. Just as he suspected, he found a man past 40 standing there.
あなた警
警察の？あ、では娘のことで。
ええ。先日この近くで。
それは。あ、私は主の鳴子昭之と言います。
Akiyuki bowed to them.
ですが、届けを出したのはもうずいぶん前です。
遺体で発見された少女が失踪したのは半年ほど前になります。
はあ。
Doesn't sound like he was won over by that answer. Perhaps he's already given up on seeing his daughter alive again. Not that Masaki blamed him for that. Anyone would lose hope if a girl that young had been missing for so long.
この辺りで不審な人物を見かけたことはあります。
不審人物ですか？
Akiyuki cocked his head and shot his wife a questioning look.
怪しいというほどではないと思いますが、この近くで一人暮らしをしている男の人がいまして。
Satoko then went on to explain more. According to her, a man over 40 had been living by himself in a nearby apartment complex built just a few years back. However, not only did he rarely venture outdoors, if ever, no one had any idea what he did for a living either.
それだけで不審者扱いというの。
After all, Masaki himself was a single man on the verge of 40.
まあ、
Yeah.
そのくらいの年齢ではすでに所帯を
But
持ってい
think
る
about
の
it,
が普通
Masaki.
だからな。
Someone around your age, right? Single, living in an apartment complex that was just recently constructed. Keeps to himself, hardly ever leaves the house. Like, to the point where no one even knows what he does for a living. Like, I'm thinking we found your bro. Doji nodded to herself.
そうかもしれませんが。
Information seemed too flimsy to cast someone as suspect in Masaki's opinion.
その男はどちらに住んでいるのですか？
ええ、この先の。
Satoko gave Toji the location of the apartment complex.
ありがとうございます。こちらで調べてみます。
Doji wrote down the address and closed her notebook.
また何かお尋ねすることがあるかもしれませんが。
ええ、こちらこそ。
Masaki and Toji descended the hill after bidding farewell to the
不
Nauticos.
審者について調べますか？
Yes.
そうだな。まずは近所で情報を集めよう。
It's fucking Naori. Masaki and Toji arrived at the apartment complex Satoko Nautica had pointed them toward.
おそらくこの辺りだと思います。
Rosa's small single-story apartment building stood side by side. There wasn't any point in checking their nameplates without a name to cross-reference.
聞き込みをしてみるか。
Toji approached a pair of housewives at the edge of the road who were fiercely engaged in some sort of gossip or another.
失礼。ちょっとお尋ねしたいことがあるの。
Masaki surveyed the area as Toji interviewed the residents. What he found were tenement houses that appeared to have been built in the mid to late 1950s. Yards large enough to hang clotheslines Yards large enough to hang clotheslines on stood before them, cordoned off by hedges. The apartments didn't appear to be all that big on the inside. From what Masaki could tell, they probably had a kitchen, living room, and 1 to 2 additional rooms. In other words, they were sufficiently large for an average nuclear family or four. Certainly not the kind of place Masaki would expect a single man to live by himself.
待たせたな。
You don't need to open with that line. It was then that Toji rejoined him.
何か聞けましたか？
ああ、相変わらず名前はわからないが、それらしき人物が住んでいる場所は把握できた。
Toji took the lead and sauntered off. The two passed rows of identical apartments.
5号棟。
Toji proceeded onward a little longer before coming to a halt.
ここのようだな。
The entryway didn't look any different from the other apartments. There wasn't any nameplate though. Nor was there any mail in the door's mail slot.
私は裏に回るからしばらく経ったらドアをノックしてみる。中のやつが飛び出してきても逃がすなよ。
分かってますよ。
Toji circled to the back of the apartment. Masaki took a deep breath to calm himself down. Doubt this man would just burst down the door and make a break for it, but better safe than sorry. Shortly thereafter, Masaki approached the door once he figured he'd waited long enough.
すみません。ちょっといいですか？
However, Masaki received no response. Pressed his ear against the door for a few seconds, but heard nothing, not even a pin dropping. Perhaps he's out. Masaki quietly turned the doorknob, but it was locked, as suspected. Suddenly, a car horn honked. Masaki turned around to find Reiji's car parked on the shoulder of the road. At least it was Reiji, not someone be like, "Are you trying to enter that guy's house?"
なんだお前、不法侵入か？
I stopped the car and got out after seeing Masaki in front of one of the apartments I'd been passing.
逮捕しますか？
I even stepped forward, maybe a bit too eagerly, in fact.
違いますよ。不審者の情報があったんで調べている最中です。
And indeed, Toji emerged from behind the tenement house just seconds later.
なんだ、よくここが分かったな。
たまたま通りかかっただけだよ。で、不審者だって。
Emma and I had heard absolutely nothing about anyone like that in our investigation.
40過ぎの無職らしき男。
そうか。佐藤巡査。
わかりました。
だから自分じゃありませんって。それに自分は働いてますし。時坂さんの方が無職に近いんじゃないですか？
Ouch. Way to hit me where it hurts, man.
逮捕されますか？
いや、やめてくれ。で、そいつは留守なのか？
そのようだな。カーテンがかかっていて中の様子は見えなかったが。
まさき、佐藤さんと一緒にここの管理人のところへ行ってくれ。
捜査令状がありませんが。
そこはなんとか言いくるめてくれ。
Masaki and I departed together with a
もう
nod.
少し詳しく聞かせてくれる。
詳しくも何も3件目の不明者の鳴子家で聞いた話だ。
ここに住んでいる奴が何かしでかしたというわけでもないんだろう。
ああ、おそらくな。何かしていたらこの程度では住んでいないだろうから。
If he had, the police would have been informed that there would be a record of him in the system. For all we knew, this man was just a local hermit. The guy no one knew, so they spread random rumors about him.
だからこそ事件に関係している可能性もある。
Yeah.
まだ何とも言えないさ。
I just shrugged and waited for Masaki and Ayame to get back. Shortly thereafter, the two of them returned with a middle-aged man, the landlord, if I had to guess.
よろしくお願いします。
はいはい、待ってくださいね。
The landlord produced a ring of
何
keys,
か話は聞けたか？
stepped away from the door and turned to Masaki.
それがすでに退去しているそうです。
はあ？それを早く言えってんだ。
Now we were just wasting our time.
それはそうなんですけど、退去したのがつい昨日のことで。
Wait, so we just packed up and left in a hurry only a day ago? Damn, looks like we might be onto something after all.
どんな奴がいたか聞いたか？
ええ、池田信介という名前で、年は40。
40過ぎか。
3年ほど前からだそうですが、特に問題もなかったようです。
時坂先生。
Emma abruptly addressed me. It was then I noticed the apartment door was finally open.
まずは中を調べるか。
そうですね。
The apartment, as it turned out, was clean as a whistle. This Nobusuke Ikeda appeared to have taken everything that hadn't been nailed down with him, minus the curtains shrouding the windows.
台所もきちんと掃除されているな。まめな人間だったようだ。
Checked the closet, but there was nothing in there either.
綺麗すぎると思いませんか？
Emma frowned, surveying the room carefully.
そうだな。管理人さん、こちらは退去後に掃除などは行ったのですか？
そのままですよ。
In that case, it had to have been this Nobusuke Ikeda's doing. He gone to the effort of leaving the apartment literally spotless. Almost as if he wanted to erase every last trace that he'd ever been here.
何も残されてはいないようだな。
Toji shrugged after scanning the room.
管理人さん、住んでいた池田さんは出て行く際に何か言ってませんでしたか？
いやー、お世話になりましたと言われたくらいですよ。
それではこの部屋をもう少し調べさせていただきます。
それは構いませんが、何か事件と関係があるんでしょうか？
それをこれから調べるんですよ。畳も剥がすつもりですが、きちんと後片付けはしますので。
The landlord nodded, then departed after giving us his permission to search.
畳を剥がすんですか？
まあそれは例えばの話だが、ここに住んでいた奴が事件に関わっていたとするならば、
床下に死体を隠していれば少々片付けたところで匂いは残っているだろうからな。
Masaki stared at the floor, throat momentarily bulging as if barricading an onslaught of bile.
ここにいて匂ってねえんだから心配するな。
I slipped on a pair of white rubber gloves.
さて、始めるぞ。
Oh boy, so many choices. Start with the curtains. The curtains were all this Nobusuke Ikeda had left behind. If their shabby state was any indicator, they'd clearly seen years of use. But had he left them for any specific reason?
目隠しだったのかもしれませんね。
さあな。
Open the curtains and check the windows. However, he must have cleaned them, seeing as there were no fingerprints on the glass. Guess that's a dead end. Next, I inspected the curtains themselves. Unfortunately, there was nothing there, not even in the folds on the hem nor the rod.
何の変哲もないな。
そのようだな。
That's the thing. I want you to look ordinary, huh? Let's check those mats. I examined the tatami mats covering the floor. Closer inspection revealed dents, as well as yellow spots that had clearly spent too much time in the sun. Furthermore, there were rectangular indentations from where a piece of furniture, likely a bookcase or something, had once stood. I also found 4 depressions where a desk must have sat.
とりあえず畳を剥がしてみるか。
どうせ自分がやるんですよね。
Damn, is this guy psychic?
何か細くて平べったいものありませんか？
手帳くらいしかないぞ。
そんなので畳は剥がせませんよ。
車にネジ回しがあるはずです。
They had temporarily left the
こ
apartment.
んなの指を引っ掛けて持ち上げられないか。
じゃあやってみせてください。
Refusing his challenge would have dealt a massive blow to my pride, so I crouched down and grabbed the edge of the mat.
全然引っかからねえな。
Unfortunately, the tatami mats were designed to link up to the ones around them to become one giant surface, so that didn't pan
不
out.
器用だな。
んなことねえだろ。
Doji quipped as she loomed over me.
お前が畳の上に乗ってたら動かせるものも動く。
ああ、悪い。
I thought I was confident I could have lifted it even without someone weighing it
お
down.
待たせしました。
Emma rejoined us just then as at the best possible time.
貸してくれないか？
Masaki took the screwdriver and wedged it under the mat.
こうして。よっと。
He then used the screwdriver as a lever to lift the mat. Whipping up ferocious clouds of dust that forced me to shield my
ど
mouth.
うだ。
これだけ埃が舞うのはしばらく動かしてないってことだろう。まあ他の畳の下も調べるか。
Thus, we peeled off the mats and examined the floorboards. They'd blanketed one by one, only to find out that those hadn't been fiddled with since they'd been installed, from what we could tell.
この床板も剥がしますか？
外した跡がないようであれば必要ないだろうな。
I crouched down inside the gaps between the floorboards. Fortunately, I couldn't see or smell anything.
懐中電灯を使い
I illuminated the floorboards I'd been poring over with her flashlight she must have retrieved from the car.
ああ、ありがとう。
I had her shine it between the gaps in the floorboards, allowing me to see beneath them. All I found on there was an uneven patch of dirt that must have been the foundation.
何もないようだな。
Nothing as morbid as a dead body, that was for sure.
結局、部屋掃除をしただけか。
Oh, we're not done yet. Doji sighed.
そう言うなよ。さて、元に戻すか。
And so we returned the mats to their original spots.
まさき、
Closet.
押し入れの中を調べてくれ。
Get back in the closet, Masaki.
自分でやってくださいよ。
You're the assistant. Masaki opened the closet and checked it despite his grumbling.
全く何も残っていませんね。
床板がめくれたりしないか。
秒でしっかり固定されてますね。抜き差しした様子もありません。
上にも何も入っていませんね。
I almost stood on her tiptoes to check the rack within. Oh, great. In here, I thought if he'd picked one place to hide something, it'd be there. The walls. There wasn't anything strange about the
死
walls.
体が塗り込められているということもないようですね。
You don't say.
壁も薄いようだし、何かあればすぐに隣室にバレるだろうな。
誰かを連れ込んでいたりということもなかったと管理人の方はおっしゃっていました。
Does that mean that he hadn't brought any victims here then?
鴨居の上もきれいに掃除されてますね。
Masaki traced along the beams running between the columns.
何か挟まっていたりはしないか。
そういったものはないよう。
The ceiling. I scanned the ceiling.
まさき、お前ちょっと天井裏を探ってきてくれ。
いや、やぶから棒に何言ってるんですか？
お前の背丈なら天井に手が届くだろう。板が外れるところがないか調べてくれ。
What did he think I was? What did he think I was gonna make him ride on my shoulders or something? I mean, yeah, the thought crossed my mind, but that's beside the point.
だったら最初からそう言ってくださいよ。
Masaki bitched and moaned, yet did as I asked all the same.
これ端から端まで一枚の板になってますね。
The board adjoining the ceiling beams rose very slightly every time Masaki pushed on it.
端の方はどうだ。
ダメですね。 どこも動きません。
This guy didn't hide something out there after all, then. What about this door? No? I guess that's where we came in from. So walls. Yeah, no, just walls, curtain, floor, closet, ceiling. Alright. Guess we've done about as much as we can.
どう思う？
I don't. Thought you turned to me.
どう思うも何も
I gave the wall a little tap with my fist.
これだけの厚みしかない壁で人をさらってどうこうできるとは思えないな。
遺体を隠していたという痕跡もありませんからね。
となると全くの無関係なのか。
I wouldn't rule that out. Nah, I don't think it does.
そうだな。ただの不審人物だったと考えられる。やれやれ。本人がすでにいなくなっていて助かった。
In that case, we would have been charged with defamation and an illegal search.
ですが時坂さん、ここの住人が遺体の発見と前後して退去したのは。
Masaki wasn't so easily persuaded, however.
確かにその点は気になるが。
では私が退去した住人について調べてみます。
ああ、そうだな。
We split up to question the locals before regrouping in the evening.
所轄署の協力で周辺や空き部屋も調べましたが、特に不審な点はありませんでした。
池田という人が一人で出歩いているのを目撃している人はいましたが、誰かと一緒にいることはなかったようです。
In other words, no one had witnessed him and the victim together.
関わりは見つからずか。
本当に無関係なのかもしれませんね。
ああ。だがやはり気になる。
Because it's Naori.
無関係の他の事件に関わっていて、警察が付近を捜査しているから逃げたという。
It's almost like that body turned up and he was like, oh, police? Nope, I'm gone. Now that sounded a lot more likely.
捜査本部の方から何か連絡は？
今のところありません。
So they haven't had any more luck than us, huh?
私はそろそろ本部に戻らなくてはなりませんが。
Orgy? I am a check your watch.
そうだな。今日のところはこれで解散かな。
Sun was already setting after all.
わかった。そうしよう。
I went home after dropping Masaki and Toji off at the train station. Once out of the car, I popped a cig between my lips. And abandoned my habit of smoking exclusively outside the house, even though Yukuri no longer lived with me. Though part of that was because she'd never leave me alone about it if she visited, only to find out that was no longer the case. The night sky devoured my puff of smoke. I loved the taste of cigarettes in the clear winter air. For even though it made me chilly, it also kept my mind sharp. And again, maybe that was just part of my wild imagination. Stomped out my smoke and threw the butt into my car's ashtray once I was done. With that settled, I went inside and motioned to turn on the lights. When I heard snoring.
起きろ、ステラ。
I flipped the lights on.
おかえり、レイジ。
Stella got to her feet and huddled against me.
おいおい。寝るならせめて布団で寝ろよ。
レイジ待ってたから。
ああ、そうかい。
Forced Stella to sit back down on the sofa.
晩ご飯用意しといた。
ありがとうな。
I went to the kitchen and reheated a pot on the
ステラ
stove.
は食ったのか？
まだ。
That'll be dinner for two then. In all honesty, Stella was a lifesaver. Without her, I'd probably have just gotten lost in my thoughts with no way out. Returned into the living room with 2 bowls of haphazardly heaped rice in hand.
ありがとう。
Stella and I sat across from one another and had dinner.
忙しい？
まあな。
I nodded.
そう。
何かあるのか？
A twinge of concern struck me when I saw gloom shroud Stella's face.
なんでもない。
なんでもないこと。
However, I stopped myself before I could finish. She's probably keeping it to herself for my sake. I knew because we both shared the same kind of pain. If I had to guess, Stella had been about to bring up the prospect of marriage. Yeah, I doubt that.
トウコのことか。
Stella gave a tiny nod.
お墓参り行きたいなって。
I once had I paid Toko's grave a visit in the 6 years since she'd been exhumed and reburied. I'm just gonna bring myself to go until the day I finally had news for her.
もう少し待ってくれ。そうしたら必ず。
うん。待ってる。
I told Stella about everything. That included the baby Naoto Kuroya had taken away, along with her relation to me.
元気でいるから。
I knew she was only saying that to make me feel better. I wanted to believe it more than anything else.
トウコの代わりに待ってるから。必ず。
分かっているさ。
She's alive. She has to be. I don't know, bud. After all, if I didn't hold out hope, who would? Masaki and Ayame went over to Chofu.
で、ここにいた住人の素性を調べればいいんだね。
ええ。近所の方に聞き込みをして、それをもとに似顔絵でも作成できればいいのですが。
Suddenly, Ayame shot Masaki a dubious glance.
描けますか？
まあ、なんとかしてみるよ。
While Masaki worked in art, he still hadn't done any drawing recently. If only she were still around.
所轄の方に池田信介という人物について
This is a
調
false
べてもらい
name
ま
because
し
it's
た。
actually Naoto Kuroya.
そりゃあまあ、政治家の名前を並べただけだからね。
あ、そうですね。
Ayama's gaze awkwardly shifted to her notebook as if she'd only just noticed that herself.
まあいいや。偽名であるならば追うのは難しくなるね。
Masaki resisted the urge to make a quip at Ayama's expense and shifted into thinking mode instead. Their suspect had moved out on the 16th, whereas the body had been found on the 15th. However, they'd yet to tie him to the murder.
もし犯人、あるいはそれに近い人物だった場合、
どういうことですか？
Ayama cocked her head.
犯人だったら遺体が発見される前に逃げるんじゃないかな。遺棄すると同時に逃走するのが普通だと思うよ。
なるほど。
Ayama nodded and scribbled something down in her notebook.
だとするならば、周囲に警察官が増えたことによ
Uh-huh.
り移動を余儀なく
Go
別
on.
の犯罪者ということでしょ
Make
う
the connection.
犯罪者と決まったわけではないけど、身を隠したい人物なのかもしれないね。
探偵の助手としてはいい推理だと思います。
ありがと
She still wants my old job, doesn't she?
う。名前を隠すとなると、
After all, Masaki was in the same boat himself. Yes, you are. Make the connection.
今回の件とは違う事件関係者か、借金取りや裏社会からの逃走、単なる世捨て人。
警察から逃げようとするなら、やはり何らかの犯罪者か。
Masaki reminisced on his own days laying low from the law. Back when he'd first got into hiding after murdering Saya Shigesa, he'd been absolutely terrified of the police, so much so that it verged into full-on paranoia territory. He'd gone out as little as possible and only talked to others when he absolutely had to. In hindsight, he realized he'd been far more cautious than necessary, though in all fairness, he had just returned from years of fighting in the war.
まずは事件と関係があるかを判断すべきでしょうか。
事件との関わりを明らかにするのであれば、14日の夜の行動を調べるべきだろうね。
では、その時間のことを重点的に聞き込みしていきましょう。
Ayamo then marched toward a nearby house.
じゃあ、自分は向こうの家から聞いていくよ。
Masaki split off from Ayamo and began questioning people. Unfortunately, though, neither of them managed to acquire any worthwhile testimony in the end.
いらっしゃい。あら、まだお仕事中？
Kyoko hailed Ozme the moment he stepped into Moonworld.
僕を少し借りるぞ。
Ozme headed for the table furthest from the door with no further explanation.
あ、コーヒーを2人分おね。
Ayamo gave Kyoko their orders. She trailed after her superior.
で、結局何も出てこなかったのか。
Ozme wasted no time in getting down to business.
はい。不審者の情報をもとに聞き込みをしたのですが、
Ayamo shook her head as she read from her notebook.
死体が遺棄されたと思われる時間帯に外出していた様子はなく、それ以前でも被害者のような少女と共にいたのを目撃されたことはないようです。
それなのに事件発覚後、早々に部屋を引き払ったか。
Ozme scratched at his thickening stubble in contemplation. Some people might have moved away after a corpse had been found in their neighborhood due to believing it corrupted as a result. However, that likely wasn't in this man's case, since people had found him sketchy beforehand.
コーヒーお待たせしました。ありがとうございます。
Aimu gratefully took the tray and cups offered to her. Kyoko had probably been waiting for a gap in their conversation to serve them. She's always been considerate like that.
監禁から身を隠したがるようなやつであっても、証拠もなしに捕まえることはできねえ。
Ozumi resumed the conversation once Kyoko had returned to the counter.
それは分かっています。
そもそもそいつの餌をガサ入れしたのだって始末書もんだ。いくらレイジのやつに乗せられたと言えな。
それは反省しています。
Aimu hung her head.
若いうちはそんくらいがちょうどいいんだがな。
Ozumi tossed a sugar cube into his mug.
ま、責任は俺が取る。お前さんは自由に動け。
ありがとうございます。
Aimu bowed to Ozumi.
え？そこに住んでたやつがどこに行ったのか分かったのか？
Somewhere else.
いいえ、そもそも偽名のようで、住民票の移動もありませんでしたし。
部屋の荷物を持ち出したんじゃねえのか？
家具などは近くに捨てられていたそうです。机、本棚、布団しかありませんでしたが、部屋の状況を見るにもともと物が少なかったのだと思われます。
木の実木のままか。
That was true. That meant he probably had somewhere else to go. Perhaps with family. Did he go back to Hitogata? And if he did, he probably wouldn't dare do anything that rouses suspicion a second time.
事件と無関係であることを祈るしかねえな。
やはり死体遺棄事件とは無関係なのでしょうか。
In this specific case, yes. Guiltless altogether? No.
今のところはな。関係しているとすりゃ、なんだ。天罰の絵の事件の方だろ
Or
うな。
maybe go a bit further back than that.
そちらはすでに関係者が逮捕されていますよね。
ただ、あの絵が六式誠に渡った理由がわからないままだ。
I don't think so.
気に留めておきます。
今は気に留めるだけにしておけよ。目の前の事件を捨ておくわけにはいかねえからな。
わかりました。
ま、刑事じゃねえやつは向こうを調べるだろうが。
There was nothing Ozumi could do to stop him. As a policeman, nor a friend.
では、私はそろそろ。
おう。
Aimu saluted and left money for her coffee before departing without another
し
word.
っかりしているわね。
Hell yeah.
最近の若いやつにしては上出来だよ。
Ozumi shot a look over the entrance from his new spot at the counter.
あら、年寄りみたいなこと言っちゃって。
うるせえよ。
Ozumi tossed a sugar cube into his coffee before gulping the whole thing down. Okay. Went to CID Section 1 only to find Ayumi there all by herself.
佐藤さん、魚住は？
警部は
そうか。君はこれからどうするんだ？
調布へ行って聞き込みの続きをする予定です。
じゃあそれについていくとするか。
わかりました。